For nearly a decade, the Toronto Maple Leafs have carried a single identity. A star-studded roster built around the so-called Core Four: Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares. Year after year, they promised hope. Year after year, heartbreak followed. But now, everything feels different. Mitch Marner, the quiet engine of Toronto's attack, the playmaker who could see the ice like few others, is gone. Traded to Vegas in a blockbuster move that signaled something fans feared all along. This era might be coming to an end. The Leafs added new names, shuffled their depth, and tried to balance the books. But with every roster move, one question kept echoing. Is the championship window closing, or is there still enough left to chase the cup? In this video, we'll break down the end of the Marner era, what the Leafs gained, and what they lost. We'll examine Matthews' new role as the unquestioned leader, look at whether Toronto's depth and defense can hold up, and measure them against a brutal Atlantic division that only keeps getting stronger. Finally, we'll ask, when the playoffs arrive, will the Leafs have what it takes? Stay locked in, because the answer isn't as simple as you might think. For years, Mitch Marner was more than just a winger in Toronto. He was the heartbeat of their offense, the player who didn't just pile up points but made everyone around him better. His vision and passing opened lanes that didn't exist for anyone else, and his chemistry with Austin Matthews turned Toronto's top line into one of the most feared duos in the league. Night after night, Marner brought consistency. Rarely injured, rarely off his game, and always carrying the weight of expectations with quiet confidence. But then, reality caught up. The Maple Leafs were stuck in a loop of high expectations followed by playoff heartbreak, and eventually, something had to give. The front office could no longer justify running back the same core, especially with contracts ballooning and cap space disappearing. Marner, despite his value, became the piece that management decided to move. Not because he wasn't elite, but because change had become unavoidable. His departure wasn't just a transaction, it was symbolic. It marked the collapse of the Core Four experiment that defined an entire era of Leafs hockey. For nearly a decade, fans pinned their hopes on Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares, finally pushing Toronto to the promised land. Now, with Marner gone, that dream has been shattered, and what's left is something far more uncertain. Without him, Toronto enters uncharted territory, a team still talented, still dangerous, but no longer defined by the vision of four superstars carrying them to glory. Instead, they face a new identity crisis, one where excuses no longer apply, and every failure will be judged under the shadow of what was lost. The Marner trade wasn't a total loss. Toronto brought in Nicholas Roy, a versatile center who adds size, grit, and defensive reliability. They added Matthias Maccelli, a young playmaker with upside. Dakota Joshua and Michael Pezzetta bring energy, toughness, and depth scoring. And perhaps the most important move of the offseason, they locked up Matthew Knies on a long-term extension, ensuring one of their brightest young talents won't walk away. But then you look at the flip side. Marner's 90-point consistency is gone. His chemistry with Matthews, developed over nearly a decade, vanished overnight. His ability to run the power play, to transition the puck, to tilt the ice, that's not easily replicated by depth pieces. Therefore, what the Leafs gained in balance, they may have lost in brilliance, and that trade-off could define the entire season. With Marner gone, Austin Matthews now stands as the undisputed face of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's already proven himself as one of the best pure goal scorers of his generation, a Rocket Richard winner, a league MVP, a player capable of taking over games with a single wrist shot. But this season, the challenge goes beyond goals. Without Marner feeding him those picture-perfect passes, Matthews has to shoulder more responsibility than ever before. But then, scoring is only one part of the equation. Leadership, accountability, and the ability to elevate teammates are what truly define the greats. In Toronto, those qualities are magnified 100 times over because every slump, every missed opportunity becomes front-page news. And when the city has been starving for a cup since 1967, patience runs thin. Matthews doesn't just need to be a superstar, he needs to prove he can carry the team through the turbulence of a long season, into the pressure of the playoffs, and beyond the ghosts that have haunted the franchise for decades. If he shines, he cements himself as one of the greatest to ever wear the Leafs jersey. If he falters, the questions about whether he can truly lead this team to a championship will only grow louder. Therefore, this isn't just another season for Austin Matthews. It's a defining chapter in his career, one that could determine whether he's remembered as the man who finally ended Toronto's drought or another superstar who came up short when it mattered most. In past years, Toronto could at least comfort themselves with the idea that they were one of the few true contenders in the Atlantic. Not anymore. The Florida Panthers just proved what dominance looks like. Tampa Bay still has playoff DNA, even if age is creeping in. Boston remains pesky, even in transition, and now Ottawa and Montreal, two rebuilding rivals, are no longer pushovers. The Senators are faster, tougher, and finally balanced. The Canadiens are brimming with young talent itching to make the leap. But then, experience still matters. The Leafs with Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, and Reilly have been in the wars before. They've felt the pressure, the criticism, the spotlight. Young teams like Ottawa and Montreal haven't. Therefore, the Leafs aren't out of the picture. But their margin for error has never been thinner. Championship windows don't stay open because of stars alone. They stay open because of depth, and for Toronto, that's where the questions begin. The defense remains a work in progress. Morgan Rielly is steady but not elite defensively. Trade rumors swirl around him and Brandon Carlo. The rest of the blue line is filled with maybes, players who could rise or crumble. Goaltending? Still a gamble. Ilya Samsonov has shown flashes but remains inconsistent. Joseph Woll has potential but is unproven under heavy fire. But then, hockey is full of surprise heroes. Remember Jordan Binnington's miracle run? Remember how Bobrovsky silenced critics in Florida? All it takes is one hot stretch. Therefore, Toronto's weakness could become its strength, or it could become the fatal flaw that shuts the window for good. On paper, Toronto still looks like a playoff team. Matthews and Nylander guarantee goals. Tavares, while aging, still contributes. Knees could take a major leap. The new additions add energy. But then, the regular season isn't just about talent, it's about consistency. Toronto's biggest issue in past years hasn't been ability. It's been keeping the foot on the gas against weaker opponents, avoiding slumps, and staying healthy. Therefore, don't be surprised if Toronto hovers near the top 3 in the Atlantic, but also don't be surprised if they spend stretches looking like a team searching for an identity. The Leafs can win 50 games in the regular season, and history tells us nobody will care. In Toronto, the measuring stick has never been October through April. It's what happens after, and that's where the demons wait. For nearly 2 decades, the Leafs became the face of playoff failure. Blown 3-1 leads, first-round collapses, and one agonizing stumble after another. Even the breakthrough win over Tampa Bay felt hollow when it was followed by another early exit. For fans, every spring feels less like a fresh opportunity and more like reliving a nightmare. But then, history also shows that demons can be exorcised. The Washington Capitals were once called chokers until they finally lifted the cup. The Avalanche spent years falling short before breaking through. Even the Blues went from dead last in January to champions in June. Sometimes it only takes one season, one bounce, one unexpected hero to flip the script. Therefore, the Leafs' biggest obstacle isn't just the teams they'll face, it's the weight of their own past. And until they prove otherwise, every playoff game will carry the ghosts of everything that came before. So, is the window still open? The truth is more complicated than a simple yes or no. On one hand, Toronto still has Austin Matthews, one of the most dangerous goal scorers in the world. William Nylander continues to prove he can deliver in the biggest moments. John Tavares, though aging, brings leadership and steady production. Matthew Knies could blossom into a star right before our eyes. Put that together, and you still have the foundation of a contender. But then, the cracks are obvious. Mitch Marner's absence leaves a hole that can't be patched overnight. The defense remains shaky, the goaltending inconsistent, and the division unforgiving. Ottawa and Montreal are no longer pushovers. Florida is still the class of the East. Even a step backward this year could push the Leafs out of true contention. Therefore, the Leafs stand at a crossroads. The window isn't wide open, but it hasn't slammed shut either. It's hanging by a hinge. Fragile, unstable, and under more pressure than ever. How Toronto responds this season will decide whether it stays cracked open for another run, or whether it finally closes on an era that promised so much, but delivered so little. The Maple Leafs championship window isn't wide open anymore. It's cracked, fragile, unpredictable, and creaking under the weight of expectations. But it hasn't slammed shut just yet. If Matthews rises, if Nylander delivers, if Knies blossoms, and if just one goaltender catches fire, Toronto still has a path. But if the same mistakes repeat, if the same weaknesses remain, then this era might go down as the most painful what if in hockey. So, is the window still open? Barely, and every game this season will determine how long it stays that way. What do you think? Is Toronto's time up, or do they still have one last run in them? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next.